Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. We are live right now on Al Jazeera and YouTube. Today, we explore three stories making headlines around the world. In Denmark, new laws mandating so-called ghetto children to be trained in Danish values have critics accusing the government of promoting xenophobia. In Mosul, we look at the state of Iraq's second biggest city almost 1 year after ISIL was defeated. But first, the Rohingya. Tens of thousands of refugees living in camps on the borders of Myanmar and Bangladesh are threatened by flooding and monsoon rains. Al Jazeera's Mohammed Jamjoom is in Cox's Bazar.
When Sabera Begum fled the horrors of Myanmar and crossed into Bangladesh, she thought she'd found some safety for her daughter and the rest of her surviving relatives. Then the rains came. Sabera is among the approximately 42,000 people here identified by aid agencies as being at high risk from the elements. Which means that, for her and many other Rohingya refugees, things are beginning to change for the better. Shabia Mantu tells me many of the areas where Rohingya refugees settled in this sprawling campsite are prone to natural disasters.
So today we've had relocations of refugee families who are living in areas that are high at risk of landslides and flooding, and we've relocated them to new sites here in the camp on safer ground where they can be better protected.
In this extension to the camp, it's a race against time. These days, the construction is constant. For Sabera's family, at last, some relief. A first meal in their new dwelling. It may not look like much, but for them right now, it makes all the difference in the world.
Mohammed Jamjoom joins us now from Cox's Bazar. Hi there, Mohammed. When you do your storytelling, when you report, it's always through the eyes of the refugees, the displaced people. Looking at your Twitter feed right now, Gul Zahar, a Rohingya refugee. This is something that you're working on. We will see later on Al Jazeera News. But what's her story? Why is she important?
Well, it's really fascinating and quite sad. Gul Zahar is a woman who's in her 90s. She doesn't know her exact age, which is quite common with Rohingya refugees of that generation. But she has fled Myanmar three separate times in her life because of the persecution faced by Rohingya. And the first time was in 1978, and the second time was in 1991, and then 2017. The last great exodus that we've been covering now for the past several months. Now, she's brought with her her extended family. So in this one hut in Kutupalong camp, which is the largest refugee settlement in the world, close to 1 million Rohingya refugees here in Cox's Bazar, in this sprawling makeshift settlement, there are 4 generations of her family. There's her there is her son, his name is Oli Ahmed. There is her granddaughter, her grandson-in-law, and her great-grandchildren as well. So it was really fascinating to get to speak with them today. We spent several hours out basically where they are in the area of their camp today. And they were telling us about how miserable it had been for them in the last several years. And, you know, her son had also fled 3 times, and he talked about what that was like, and her grandchildren talked about what it was like. And you know, this is a family that really, I believe their experience mirrors the experience of so many other Rohingya. This is a group that isn't just the largest group of stateless people in the world, it's also one of the world's most persecuted minorities, and we need to remember that. And so when I found out about this family, we worked hard to try to get this story done. We're going to be writing and editing in the next couple of days, hope to get it on next week. But we wanted to just showcase this.
Absolutely, people can watch that story as they follow your reporting on Al Jazeera. We have questions for you. This is Ishmael. He asks on Twitter, presently, what steps are the Myanmar government taking to help Rohingya refugees?
Well, if you speak to aid workers and UN officials, it doesn't seem like they're taking many steps at all. Now, I've never been to Myanmar, but I will say that, you know, this past week here in Cox's Bazar, just a few days ago, you had the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He was here. You had the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, the president of the World Bank. They were here to try to raise awareness about the plight of the Rohingya, the mass suffering and trauma that they've experienced. And the United Nations Secretary General, you know, he came right out and said that he's really never seen anything on this scale before in his life. And he said that the government of Myanmar needs to do much more. Now, there have been these memos of understanding that have been signed between the government of Myanmar and the United Nations to try to begin a repatriation process so that Rohingya refugees can go back to Myanmar. But this is at best problematic because details of that memo of understanding leaked, and it seemed as though it did not refer to the group as Rohingya. It did not clarify if they would get citizenship rights. And so in the past week, I've been speaking to a lot of refugees here who are quite concerned about it. They say first and foremost that, you know, Rohingya should be involved in any discussions about their group, their population. But furthermore, all the others that I've been speaking with this week say that they don't believe that Myanmar is serious. This is a population that would love to be able to go back home, but they believe that they are in danger. They don't believe that they will get citizenship, and they don't think that the government of Myanmar has done anything to demonstrate that they are serious about accepting Rohingya and to let them come back and to give them the rights that they say they deserve.
Mohammed, there's a moment that you caught. I'm going to show it from your Instagram account, and it's a moment where people are lining the streets. There's this UN meeting going on, and also the president of the World Bank is there, UNHCR are there, Refugee Agency of the UN, and there's this moment that you capture with people, and they want dignity, security, Rohingya citizenship. What else are you hearing that they want right now, that they are demanding that they have?
Look, on the one hand, Femi, they want their rights. I mean, this is a group of people that has suffered the kind of atrocities that's hard to even imagine. I mean, when I came here last October for the first time and started speaking to Rohingya refugees about what they had suffered, what they had been exposed to, and the abuses that have been brought against them by the Myanmar military, I couldn't process it. It's almost unfathomable. So on the one hand, you have a group of people that want to be safe. They want to live their lives. But on the other hand, this is a group of people that's also stateless. They want citizenship. They do not have citizenship in Myanmar. They would love to be able to go back, but they believe that they are in danger. And they feel as though they've been marginalized from the process. They feel that there are these international bodies that are talking about them and talking about protecting them, but that they're not so much in that process themselves. And so a lot of the people that I've been speaking with this week have said there's no way that they're going to go back unless they are guaranteed citizenship rights in Myanmar, which they've not had.
Mohammed, just something practical, which is the weather, the monsoon season. You captured that on video. Let's have a look.
Cox's Bazar for hours. It's tapered off a bit in the last 20 minutes or so, but when it rains like this, it really increases the sense of anxiety here about what could happen. You know, this is an area that is it's prone to natural disasters, and so the more sustained the rain is, the more fear there is that there could be more landslides, more flooding.
How miserable must that be? There's something that I noticed that is different this time. There are shelters, there is building going on, but with the monsoon coming, just as a leaving thought here, Mohammed, how are the refugees going to fare?
There's a huge amount of concern about this, Femi. Look, I should say that since the last time I was here, the improvement that has been made to the infrastructure of this huge sprawling camp, I mean, it's amazing. No doubt about it. It's shocking. I did not realize that there had been so much improvement to the infrastructure of the camp and that so much building was going on. And, you know, aid agencies, and also, we must say, Bangladeshi officials and the government of Bangladesh, they've really been trying to relocate tens of thousands of Rohingya refugees that are most vulnerable in the areas that are most prone to natural disasters to other areas of the camps. But that's not enough. And even though there is so much good intention, and even though the World Bank has pledged this week around $500 million to the government of Bangladesh to ensure help for the Rohingya, this is monsoon season. The aid agencies have been saying for months that it's critical that stuff be done so that they are protected. The rains are coming, and they're vulnerable. And there have been sustained rains the past couple of days. And there's a lot of worry right now there could be a lot more landslides and that there could be a lot more flooding.
All right, Mohammed Jamjoom is a senior correspondent at Al Jazeera English. You will see his reporting in our news coverage in the next couple of days. Thanks, Mohammed. And now we head to Denmark and a controversial set of laws targeting communities of immigrants from non-Western countries. Have a look at this video by our colleagues at AJ+.
Rundt om i landet er der parallelsamfund. Mange mennesker med de samme problemer er klumpet sammen, og det skaber en negativ spiral, en modkultur.
I want to show you some pictures. This is a young lady out playing outdoors. We have a woman swinging in the park. This final scene I want to show you is the outside of a store that specializes in modest clothing and hijabs. All of these scenes, Denmark, all of these areas being classified as ghettos. But do they look like ghettos to you? And they're also impacted by new legislation set out by the current ruling party in Denmark. To explain what is going on, we have Mikael Andersen. He is a journalist at the national newspaper Berlingske. Hi there, Mikael. Can you explain to us what is going on here with these new laws, which seem to target particular parts of Denmark?
Yes, certainly. It's it's twofold. First of all, the government would like to win the upcoming election next year, and cracking down on lack of immigration is certainly one of the things which in Danish politics has been consistent throughout the last couple of elections. And furthermore, I think there are quite real grievances about the lack of employment and the lack of ability to speak Danish in the current relevant areas which are targeted in this plan.
I mentioned the word ghetto earlier, and it's something that Melembe Dumont also tweeted to us about. Let me show you her tweet. And she says the word ghetto, it has a negative conception. It alludes to an urban space characterized by the criminalization and stigmatization of the people who live in these spaces. Is this lost in translation, or are politicians in Denmark actually using the word ghetto?
Politicians in Denmark are certainly using the term ghetto. It has perhaps some of the same connotations that it would have in most English-speaking countries, but perhaps a bit less. You're also talking about welfare, rich people ghettos in the northern suburbs of Copenhagen. So, I mean, it's not that we're talking about perhaps drawing comparisons to the Jewish ghettos of the Second World War, but some would say that there is a connection, and that furthermore it's deliberate by the government that you want to use harsh language to underscore the severity of the situation, and perhaps some would say also to stigmatize the people living there.
Would you say, and do the majority of people in Denmark, do they feel that these areas are being stigmatized, that there's xenophobia going on, or do they think, yes, of course, they have to become more Danish?
I think that most would say that they would have to become more Danish. I mean, this is not currently. We have the Danish Social Democrats, which are actually supporting this legislation and are also being much more aligned with the Danish right in regard to what's happening towards integration and immigration in Denmark. So I think that there is a broad majority of the Danish population which is supporting this legislation. I think that there can be no doubt about that.
So to be clear, what will you think are the highlights of this legislation that really do stand out?
Well, I think that the thing that primarily stands out is that you have pretty much defined some areas of Denmark which are singled out for particular treatment. I mean, as we saw in the video you mentioned, we are saying that it's becoming mandatory to place children younger than the age of 6 in nurseries and kindergartens. I'm not saying the video that you mentioned said that they were being separated from their parents. Actually, what will happen is that people are losing government subsidies of up to $200 per month if they refuse to comply with the legislation. But of course, it's still quite a drastic measure. But saying that you have an area where people are being treated out for different legal treatment, which is also the case in regard to punishment. If you commit crimes within these so-called ghetto areas, you will also receive a substantially harsher punishment than you would otherwise in the rest of Denmark. And that's something which is quite novel in Danish context.
Novel, some might say unfair. Let me just see what Saling Pip says here on Twitter. We can discuss the methods, but the end goal is to avoid areas where more resourceful people flee from, and public schools that do not reflect more or less average population. So that's a vote in favour of this new kind of legislation. But how are the people in these areas reacting? This is more, let me see, it's more carrot than stick. Excuse me, it's more stick than carrot.
Yes, exactly. It certainly is more stick than carrot. And I think if you look through the initiatives in this package, there are 22 initiatives which are being combined in this legislation. It is more stick than carrot. I think that most people living in these areas would see them as somewhat unfair, because in practice, it is the definitions of these ghetto areas is crime, unemployment, and also ethnicity. So, I mean, it is an indirect way of singling out people in part because of ethnicity. Of course, Danes living in the same area, ethnic Danes living in the same areas, will also be submitted to the same kind of legislation, but in practice, and also that is probably the intention. The idea is, of course, that it will primarily target immigrant people who are unemployed and therefore, perhaps for a large part, not seen as being as able to convey Danish values and learn the language as others.
I have a feeling this is not the last we will hear about this new kind of legislation. Mikko Andersen, thank you so much for guiding us through it today on the stream. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, finally, we go to Mosul in Iraq, where residents will soon mark the one-year anniversary of when ISIL was driven out by government forces. Mohammed Jamjoom, who we spoke to just a little bit earlier, filed this report before heading to Cox's Bazar.
Mosul may be clear of ISIL, but reminders of the group's reign are everywhere. Not just of the group's atrocities, but also the brutal fighting it took to topple them. Here, streets are still empty and buildings are destroyed. For the former residents who were lucky enough to escape ISIL's web of violence and inhumanity, things remain difficult. Strewn about are symbols of suffering, of youth stopped dead in its tracks, of a displacement crisis that is nowhere near over. While the situation remains dire, there are signs of hope. Some philanthropists and contractors are promising to restore this city. Still, no one expects this will be easy, attempting restoration and renewal amid so much despair.
So how much progress has been made? Exploring these questions with us now, we have Ali Al-Baroudi. He is a professor of English at the University of Mosul. Hello there, Ali. What I love about what you're doing is not only are you a professor, but you take photographs and it takes us inside of Mosul. We kind of get a viewpoint that you would share, that you would talk to, that you would see. Let's have a look here. The volume of destruction is relatively small. Over 40 families are back here. Electricity and water are on the way back. All they need is a school and the rest of the people will be back. Architecture there is more than fascinating. Now, this still looks like there's a lot of work to be done, but that was quite a positive update with that photograph. How are things in Mosul right now?
Well, we have just finished the second post-ISIS academic year. So things might be a little bit dark for some, but when there is darkness, there is light as well. The academic year was not easy at all. We went on campus for the first time, and you can never walk without looking around for for what ISIS have left behind. But now things are different. A year into the liberation, and things are different. And not only at the level of services the local and the central government are offering to people, but I'm talking about the people themselves. The people are more than willing to restore life exactly as it was before Daesh, or even better.
Ali, let me show you this comment here on Twitter. It's from Alexandra. Alexandra said the coalition prioritized the military campaign against ISIS, expecting Iraqis to foot the bill for reconstruction. There has to be some international support to rebuild, but it's a drop in the ocean. Are you feeling that outsiders are coming to help you rebuild Mosul?
Yes, and I can give some examples. We have been receiving at the level of the university, we have been receiving tons of books, of generators, of lab stuffs, but still the volume of destruction and the volume of the things that we need is far beyond any imagination, simply because what happened in Mosul is pretty much like what happened in Berlin in World War II, and is pretty much like what happened in Warsaw. So we cannot expect it, and it's never an easy task.
I'm looking here at your university. Can you point out to us the level of destruction that we see? The square looks nice, but then you look into the distance and then you see how damaged the university is.
Well, you can say that 30% of the buildings, of the infrastructure of Mosul University has been leveled to the ground. But the UNDP is doing a lot, is doing miracles. The building in this photo is for the Central Library of Mosul University. The UNDP is now removing the rubble, and as they say, they are going on refurbishing it again.
This is an interesting comment here from Sangar. And Sangar is a journalist. He is based in Iraq. He says citizens who had their houses destroyed, they don't care about the arches or history of the city. They just want to rebuild their houses and go back instead of being displaced. So there's this balance here between some of the beautiful parts of Mosul that were destroyed in the fighting, in the battle, and people needing to get back to work.
Two things that we have gravely lost in Mosul. The first thing was the identity of the city as a multi-ethnic and multicultural, multi-religious city, and then the heritage. It all started with Daesh when they blew everything beautiful off, like the shrines of the prophets, the shrines of the good people, of the ancestors, and then they ended it with the Leaning Minaret. What happened in the Nouri Mosque was far much beyond anyone could imagine.
Want to show? Yes. Let me show our viewers this. This is from the Nineveh Operations Command Center, talking about the potential danger in Mosul right now. Have a listen.
The most important issue in Mosul is that we need to start rebuilding and give hope to the people. Most of the people in Mosul have no income whatsoever, and this is a grave threat. In the short term, people can withstand 2 or 3 months without money, but patience has a threshold.
So, Ali, that grave threat, I believe he's referencing ISIL. Where are they right now? What impact are they having on Mosul, if anything at all?
In Mosul, you can never hear about them. They are gone, and hopefully forever this time. But still, the people are still afraid of the desert threat, because the desert is quite vast and quite open to other countries. And still, there are some accidents happening every now and then between Mosul and Kirkuk and Mosul and Baghdad. There are some kidnappings and hostages and execution, so they are still kind of active, but there is an operation to uproot their presence in that area recently.
Okay. Ali Abu-Rudi is a professor of English at the University of Mosul. He also is a very accomplished photographer. If you want to see his work, go to @Ali-Barudi, and you can see it anytime on Twitter. That's all the time we have for today's show. Thank you to all of our guests, and be sure to keep an eye on aljazeera.com for more coverage of these stories. I will see you online. Take care, everybody.